Good evening. My name is Esther Manheimer. I'm the mayor of the city of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you to the October 12th City Council meeting. For tonight's meeting, all council members and staff are participating virtually. For those of you out there today with us, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone, dialing 855-925-2801 and entering the code 5285. We are also broadcasting live on the city's YouTube channel. For public comment, we ask callers to sign up in advance to join the live speaker queue. We will only be taking live comments from those who signed up prior to tonight's meeting. Those callers have been provided instructions on how to participate. Each caller is allotted a 3-minute window to speak for each agenda item. We will hear live comments for up to 1 hour for each agenda item. A reminder to callers, you will first hear staff inform council that you're next to speak. Then you'll hear an automated message letting you know you're unmuted and live in the meeting. You may begin speaking after the automated message. To best ensure staff can support you in the case of technical difficulties, we ask that you join the queue no later than the beginning of the agenda item before the agenda item on which you have signed up to speak. Additionally, if you have joined the speaker queue and need to disconnect before your time to speak, please hit *4 before hanging up. You can then call back in using the same directions I just shared, and staff will enter you back in the speaker queue of your agenda item. I would like to ask all those participating in tonight's public comment to follow council's rules of decorum. The rules include the following. Speakers are only allowed to speak one time during the public comment period for each agenda item. A person may speak only if they have signed up to speak in accordance with the city's procedures. Speaker substitutions at the meeting are not allowed. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak on an agenda item. In general, each agenda item will have up to a total of 1 hour for public comment. A speaker may not share or relinquish any remaining time they have not used to another speaker. Speakers should not expect council members or city staff to comment on or respond to the speaker's comments during their 3 minutes. I will now go through and introduce all council members and staff leadership. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Vice Mayor Smith.
Hello.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Good afternoon.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Hello.
Councilwoman Roney.
Good evening.
Councilwoman Turner.
Good evening.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Hello.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Hello.
City Attorney Brad Branham.
Good evening, everyone.
City Clerk Maggie Burleson.
Hello.
All right, thank you. All right, to begin our agenda, we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Council members, if you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next on our agenda, we have proclamations. We do not have any proclamations on tonight's agenda. Next, I'll move to our consent agenda. But before we vote on the consent agenda this evening, I need to make an announcement just by way of explanation. During our meeting on September 28th, due to a broadcasting issue, the early portion of the meeting was not streamed live through our YouTube or online links. Although the meeting remained available via our telephone, we have added the full consent agenda from that meeting to tonight's vote in order to ensure full transparency in the City Council's voting process. In addition, we have taken steps to provide new safeguards to our broadcasting process in order to ensure that meetings will be put on hold during any future potential streaming disruptions. We apologize for this issue, and now we'll move on to tonight's consolidated consent agenda. Council members, do you have any questions or comments regarding the consent agenda, or do I have a motion?
This is Gwen, move to accept the consent agenda.
It's Antoinette, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, and we did not have anyone sign up to speak under this item, so I'll move to a roll call vote unless there's any questions. Just get around, I don't see any. Okay, so I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
And Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Okay, that concludes our consent agenda. And Councilwoman Roney, you gave me a heads up that you wanted to say something before we move on to presentations.
Thank you for the opportunity to address my colleagues here and the public. I am concerned about the process regarding something I feel like should have been on our agenda in recent meetings, which I have requested. On March 9th, in a closed session, council gave unanimous approval to move forward with next steps acquiring land using the $2 million in bond funds for parks. From the staff report on February 22nd, quote, the 10-acre property located at 2351 Sweeten Creek Road is owned by Carolina Day School and is wooded and undeveloped and sits adjacent to Carolina Day Athletic Complex. It is residentially zoned. Carolina Day has offered to subdivide the property and sell 9.5 plus or minus acres to the city for a public accessible park in South Asheville. Acquisition of the property would allow the city to provide recreation, community space, and necessary support facilities to increase equitable access to community and recreation services for current and future residents. That's the end of the statement. I wrongly assumed that the next step would include a public-facing agenda item, such as a consent agenda, so that the public could review the information and council would have a public vote. We need to maintain and build trust for this and future bond programming, and it surprises me we're not taking an opportunity to bring this decision into the sunshine. These are public lands acquired through and to be maintained with public dollars and should have been on a public agenda. I'm embarrassed and disappointed they were not. It should be noted that we have purchased land outside the city limits from a private school that will be annexed and maintained with public tax dollars next to the school. It is about 1 mile from Greenwood Park, adjacent to the Blue Ridge Parkway. There are a number of positives. I feel they're overshadowed by the lack of a transparent process. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, and I apologize, folks. I thought Councilwoman Roney was asking me to talk about process regarding the consent agenda. So we do not have this item on our agenda tonight to discuss, but maybe the one of the subcommittees wants to hear a report about the park purchased with bond dollars approved by the voters back in 2016, which specifically included a park space in South Asheville. That is what Councilwoman Roney is talking about. Maybe Planning and Economic Development would like to discuss that, just hear a report about it and any concerns about the process around acquiring the park space. I'm just kicking that out there as a suggestion. We don't have to make that determination tonight. Okay, we have
Esther,
two presentations on our agenda tonight. The first is a 6-month update from Asheville City Schools Foundation.
yes.
Yeah, go talk. Yes.
I think
Gwen, can you hear me? Are you having?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Your sound is a little hard for me because it's breaking up. But I think the reasoning Brad, can you explain why it wasn't on why we normally would have voted for that in for a land acquisition and done that, and why we didn't do that for this property, just so we can talk about that or understand that?
I'm more than happy to do that,
Thank you.
Councilmember Whistler. So typically speaking, in North Carolina, our open meetings laws specifically permit city councils to go into closed session for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is for city councils to set the negotiating position for the purchase of real estate. That's really what we're talking about here, because it was the city potentially purchasing this land for the construction and development of a park. The purpose of this is fairly straightforward. You don't want to publicize your bargaining position before you go into negotiation in order to safeguard the city funds. Now, typically, these items do come back to City Council for a motion of some type within the open session, generally because a budget amendment is required, and those items are always on City Council agendas. However, in this somewhat unique circumstance, the funds were already located within the budget necessary to effectuate this property purchase. It was because the funds were gathered through the bond program, as the mayor already mentioned, and therefore there were no additional requirements for City Council to give approval beyond what was given in closed session. So that is the reason in this particular circumstance why nothing else came before the council in the open session as a requirement under the law.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm doing an audio check. Am I still kind of glitching in and out? Is my audio still wonky? Yes, you're okay. All right, I'm gonna, unless there's anything else on that item, I'm gonna kick it over to begin presentations, and they're gonna swap out my laptop while we do that. Okay? Maybe anyone heard that? If you did.
We heard you. We got it.
Okay.
All right, that's my cue. Good evening, Mayor Manheimer, Vice Mayor Smith, and esteemed City Council members. My name is Dr. Darius Stanley, and I come as the Asheville City Schools Foundation Board of Directors Chair. I want to thank you for the opportunity to report on your settlement fund donation to the Asheville City Schools Foundation. The Asheville City Schools Foundation asked, next slide, I'm sorry, I meant to say that. Thank you. The Asheville City Schools Foundation asked the council to consider using the funds to support students, but also to support local Asheville City Schools Black educational professionals in the district. With the constellation of resources and efforts having the potential to significantly improve the lived realities of Black students, i.e. closing resource and opportunity gaps for Black families in terms of increasing relationships between parents and schools and Black communities through economic support, reducing student loan debt, et cetera. And so to these ends, the Asheville City Schools Foundation is using the settlement funds to support a renewing student scholarship for Black graduates of Asheville High and SOSA, pursuing education and the Black Educator Excellence Cohort, a group of 10 current Black ACS employees pursuing their next level of certification or degree. So we want to just sort of thank you for allowing us to use these funds in this way. I'll pass it over to Dr. Dickerson. And next slide.
Thank you, Dr. Stanley. Good evening, City Council members. My name is Mark Dickerson, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources for Asheville City Schools. I would like to speak to some of the specifics around the Black Educator Excellence Program and the selection of the participants. In March of 2021, a survey was sent to all Black staff in the district to gauge their interest in career advancement and introduce this opportunity to possibly receive financial assistance towards their education. Out of the 45 or so responses, only 3 or 4 staff indicated that they were interested in becoming a classroom teacher. So we had to think of diversifying the cohort based on different concentrations. We had around 15 people interested in school social work and a number of staff wanting to pursue school counseling. Long term, it wouldn't be possible to hire all of these employees for these particular positions. So we identified staff who were already pursuing degrees and or needed certification in the related field. So the current degrees and certifications our cohort is seeking is teaching licensure and certification. We have school counseling, we have school social work, we have masters in school administration, and we have 2 in the doctoral program for educational leadership. The selection of the cohort participants was a district decision. We wanted to be intentional about retaining Black staff, whether they have been with us for 5 years or 20 years. And cohort members understand and agree that upon receipt of a degree funded in whole or in part by this scholarship program, there is going to be a 3-year commitment for service in the district. Along with providing financial support for our employees as they complete their advanced degrees, certifications, and licensure, we are providing monthly academic support sessions. These designated sessions will provide a quiet space for our cohort members to work on assignments for class. Also, if they need extra eyes to proofread their work, we will provide that support as well. These Saturday sessions will be from 9 to 2 p.m. in the school board office. And we just had our first one this past Saturday, which was well attended. We will also be hosting monthly social gatherings through Asheville City Schools Foundation with a commitment to support Black Wall Street and Black-owned businesses. In fact, we had our first social gathering at Grind, ABL, last week. So thank you again. I'm going to pass this over. Well, the next 2 slides will show members of the cohort, so you can see who they are, put names with faces. And after that, I'm going to pass this over to Mr. Whiteside, Brandon Whiteside, who will discuss the student scholarships.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon Whiteside. I'm the Scholarship and Alumni Center Coordinator for Asheville City School Foundation. More importantly, I'm also a graduate of Asheville High School / SILSA class of 2010. We at the foundation, we fund up to 40 students through 20 unique scholarships. We have been intentional in trying to provide these opportunities with our student scholarships and increasing the support that we provide, such as college application support, interviewing skills, and emergency assistance fund for college students. So out of one of those unique scholarships, we have the City of Asheville Student Scholarship, and which you'll see in the next slide. Our winner of the 2021 City of Asheville Scholarship is Jayla Williams, who was part of the City of Asheville Youth Leadership Academy, more commonly known as CALA, where she completed an internship with Asheville Parks and Rec in 2020. And Jayla is committed to becoming an educator and just supporting the next generation of students. But instead of just reading to you a whole bunch of things, I think the quote is the most profound thing about, especially involving that scholarship. So not only does this scholarship motivate me, but you do as well. To provide a resource to enable graduate students to attend college is generous and powerful. And thank you for believing in me. And as mentioned, as an alumni, I want to say thank you for believing in her, but also for our future recipients. And thank you for investing in equitable opportunities for Asheville Black students and Black educators. Next slide, sorry. And if anyone has any questions or anything, I know that we're open to any Q&A you all may have.
Thank you. That was awesome. It looks like we have a couple questions. I'm going to call on Councilwoman Mosley.
First of all, my first question is, how can I get on the email list for those social gatherings? So when you have the next one, get me on the list, please. And then actually, I just have a comment. When we were envisioning what to do with these funds, let's just say what you are doing is exactly what we hoped would happen. So thank you. And special shout out to the Vice Mayor and Councilwoman Whistler for coming together, 3 of us, and deciding what to do with this. I'm almost getting tearful about it because it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
And I want to thank Asheville City Schools Foundation just for over the last several years, really building a great group and continuing this great work. And thanks to all of you for your hard work with Asheville City Schools Foundation very much.
Job well done. The momentum is rising. I can feel it. It feels like a win for the entire city.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, until next time, we'll see you later, gentlemen. Thank you. We have one other presentation tonight, and that is the manager's report on the reparations process. And I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor, and hello again, everyone. For the manager's report, as you've heard from the mayor, we're going to provide an update on the next steps related to the city's reparation initiative. You may recall we outlined a three-phase process. Phase one was the information and truth-telling speaker series, which we completed this past June. That was kind of the formal speaker series. Phase two is the formation of the commission, which we are about to launch. This is where the real work and the heavy lifting starts. We're about to launch the selection process. We will provide you more detailed information about this effort as part of this update. And then phase three, which is the kind of fruit of the labor of the commission, was the finalize and present the report. And again, as part of the update, we'll provide an anticipated schedule for the commission to develop short, medium, and long-term recommendations to specifically address the creation of generational wealth and to boost economic mobility and opportunity in the Black community. We also shared that we would need help to support this effort in the form of a project manager. So to provide the update tonight, I am extremely pleased to welcome Deborah Clark-Jones, President of Tequity, who is the selected project management team for the city's reparation initiative. As you may recall, we went through a request for proposal process. We received 9 proposals, and Tequity was unanimously selected by an interdepartmental staff team to serve in the role as project manager for this effort. Deborah will provide you more information about her firm and provide more details concerning the next steps in the process. So without any further delay, Deborah Clark-Jones.
Thank you so much, Ms. Campbell. Madam Mayor, council members, it is indeed a pleasure to provide this project update to you this evening. I will share information on the 5 topics that you see listed here, including just a little bit about Tequity, information about the project management team, the phases, key milestones to date, as well as the appointment process that we have been working on. Next slide. Tequity is a management consulting firm, and we specialize in strategic planning, project management, analytics, and equity initiatives. We have worked on several projects in the region, including an NCDOT project, enhancing the capacity of minority and women-owned small businesses in 31 counties in the western part of the state. We conducted an economic leakage study for the New Economy Coalition, and we also served as the community engagement lead on the city's disparity study. Next slide. It's really important to describe the role of the project management support team and want to emphasize the word support. We are here to support the work of the Community Reparations Commission, and that support takes the form of the creation of a project management structure. And here we're talking about project plans, timelines, risk and issue management to make sure that the commission has what it needs to be successful in its work. We are also establishing a research infrastructure. As you all know, there are multiple topics, multiple impact areas that the commission will be delving into, and we want to make sure that they have robust information to inform their recommendations. And so we will be assisting in helping to build out that platform. Our team will be providing facilitation support to assist in building consensus. We also want to formalize resource affiliations within the community. We see this as a community-wide effort, and there are already community-based organizations that have reached out to us that would love to be a part of this project to support the efforts of the commission when those appointments are made. Sharing information with the community is also a major role. We believe that it's important to educate the community all along the way as the commission is learning more about reparations and the strategies that they may want to recommend as a part of their work. And then lastly, we believe that it's really important to look at institutionalizing the knowledge gained. We see this as a capacity building effort for the entire community. And that knowledge can be applied in the implementation efforts themselves, as well as on future projects. Next slide. And just to illustrate the project management support team, we have not only myself, but also an assistant project manager and an admin. But I'm really excited about the local liaisons that we have identified in the 5 impact areas that were cited in the resolution: criminal justice, economic development, education, healthcare, and housing. We wanted to tap individuals that not only know the community, but also know the topic, so that they can be a resource to the commission and to the anticipated work groups that we see taking the deep dives in each of these topics. We also have partnered with RTI, a research nonprofit who has worked not only domestically, but globally in all of these different areas, and they've done a lot of work in equity. We'd like for them to help us with some select recommendations. We believe that it's really important to look at the prospective impact that a select number of recommendations will have if the city invests in those recommendations, and RTI will be assisting in that effort. Next slide. There are 8 activities, and not necessarily linear in all cases, but we are currently involved in the project initiation phase, as well as doing work towards the formation of the Community Reparations Commission. And I will be talking a little bit more about that in just a second. The third activity, the commission will be delving more into reparations and looking at answering questions such as who should be eligible for the reparation recommendations that will come forward. What time frame will they want to look at? All of those decisions will be made by commission members. They will also take that deep dive that I mentioned earlier in each of those impact areas. And so the research, even though there will be a key findings document, we see that research covering additional phases as well. So that won't stop with activity 3, but it will certainly cross over some of the other activities. Activities 4, 5, and 6, of course, are the short, medium, and long-term recommendations. We anticipate having short-term recommendations, hopefully by the end of the first quarter of 2022, and concluding with long-term recommendations by first quarter of 2023 or beginning of second quarter. This timeline, of course, will be driven by the commission itself. In no way do we want to compromise quality. We want to make sure that commission members feel comfortable with their deliverables and have the time that they believe they need in order to produce a high quality product. We will conclude with a final report that will include all of those recommendations and then, of course, close out the project. Next slide. Just a few of the milestones to date. It's already been noted that the contract was awarded to Tequity on September 14th. We have had a kickoff meeting not only with staff from the city of Asheville, but also Buncombe County. They are certainly excited to support this effort, and I'm excited that they're also on board. We've also been spending time identifying those local liaisons and facilitators, and I am extremely excited about the caliber that we have been able to attract, and we are finalizing those agreements as we speak. We've also had several meetings with folks within the city, just going over some of the resources that are available, having all types of conversations around how this project will be supported, and just thrilled at the level of support overall. And then we've also been working on the nomination and application process forms, and I will go into detail on that now. Next slide. So the appointment process that we have discussed, as you all know, there will be 25 members of the Community Reparations Commission. 13 of the 25 will be nominated by neighborhood organizations, and these are neighborhoods that have historically been impacted by urban renewal, gentrification, such as Burton Street, East End Valley Street, Shiloh, South Side. And we also want to receive nominations from housing authority communities and other neighborhoods in the city. This nomination process is controlled strictly by the neighborhood organizations themselves. The process that they use to name the representatives that they would like to seat on the commission will be at their discretion. There will not be vetting of these representatives. We are looking to accept those nominations as they are received. And the other 12 appointments will be city council seats. We're looking at 6 there, as well as 6 appointments from the Buncombe County Board of Commissioners. Those appointments will be focused more on those impact areas, those that have experience in those areas. Some may have experience in multiple areas, as well as equity. So very, very excited about moving and launching this process. Next slide. Just a little more about the process and the timeline. We will be launching the advertisement for the solicitation of both nominations and applications on October 18th. So very imminent. And once those applications and nominations start coming in, of course, the council will review those that those applications that for those that they will be seating, and the county commissioners will be doing the same with their 6. And we anticipate finalizing those appointments in the December-January timeframe. Next slide. And as I mentioned before, we have completed nomination and application forms. We are converting them now to online forms. The information that we will be providing to the community, of course, will include procedures, guidelines. We are also scheduling multiple meetings to answer any questions that the community might have related to the nomination and the application process, and that information will be forthcoming when we do the announcement on October 18th. But very, very excited about moving on this very, very important step. Next slide. So that concludes my update, and would just want to say that I'm extremely excited to be a part of this effort. Looking forward to serve on behalf of the city of Asheville, and certainly excited about supporting what I'm sure will be a very dynamic commission. So thank you.
So, thank you, Deborah. I also want to thank Brenda Mills, who has been serving as an interim director of equity and inclusion, the department, who's been working very closely with Deborah, and will be working closer with her as we get ready to launch this appointment process, but just wanted to make sure that we acknowledged that she's in here on the team with us. So thank you, Brenda. And I think there are, and I couldn't tell which one came in first, Mayor, maybe Sandra and Gwen both have their hands.
Go ahead,
raised.
Sandra.
Okay. Yes. Hi, Mrs. Jones. We're so happy to have you back here with us. We're looking forward to it. I think we definitely, I'm really happy with the choice, because I really believe that you could do a great job, because you know so much about Asheville already. The one thing I was wondering, you were saying something about the application process that's opening up October 18th. Is there an end date for that?
We currently have November 15th as the end date, so we wanted to provide a complete month. That's the timeline that we have in place right now.
Okay, and also with this timeline, I'm just wondering, will this give us enough time to actually work through the process as far as selecting the people? In light of just, I was just a little concerned about that time period. I feel like it may be a little rushed, and I was just wondering your take on that.
Right. So just based on the discussions that we've had internally, everyone felt comfortable with that timeline. Also, our discussions with the county. But of course, once again, if we don't want to compromise quality, and if it looks like we might need to extend that, we will certainly have those discussions. But we considered the holidays in both November and December, and felt that it would be ample time.
Thank you.
Is it my turn, Deborah?
I think so. I was waiting for the mayor.
Oh, okay. Deborah Jones, thank you very much. Sounds exciting, and I'm excited that it's going so well so far. Two things. So the 13 folks that will come from the neighborhoods. So there's no way that it could be more than 13 nominations, right? I mean, somehow it's like we identified the 4 neighborhoods, the housing authority. I assume that we've laid out what gets to just 13 and not 20. So I'm just, one question, or what we're continuing to get, is that the council is making these decisions relative to the 13 nominations. And that's really not the case, right? That's all going to be determined based on the neighborhood associations.
Absolutely. The names that they put forward are the names that will be seated.
Okay.
So they will be expected to do their vetting process to ensure that we have, those 13. And, we certainly wanted to make sure that at a minimum that the neighborhood representatives are the majority on the commission, and coupling that with the experts in those areas. And that doesn't mean that some of those experts may not still be representatives from those communities as well. So they will just follow a different process, a competitive application process.
Okay, great. And can you just clarify, I mean, I realize, we're going to have 12 seats on this commission, but can you clarify that how other people will get involved and how we are going to make as many voices as possible, if not all voices heard in this process? That, if you're not on have you lost out if you're not one of the 25?
Oh, absolutely not. And this is something that I really want to make sure that the community hears, because when I mentioned earlier about formalizing affiliations with different community-based organizations, we see all types of opportunities for the community to be involved. I think that the only way that this can be successful is if it is a collective. And so we will be polling the community, the liaisons that I mentioned before will be reaching out to identify organizations as well as individuals that want to support this effort. Of course, we will leave it up to the commission to decide what they take advantage of. But we want to have a very detailed, robust list of what is available to them if they choose to take advantage of it. And so I'm hoping that the community will hear this and certainly reach out to us, and we will be reaching out to them as well.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. I do have a question going back to the neighborhood nomination process, please. Some of our neighborhoods might not have formal associations. What workaround have you come up with? I'm thinking of, say, housing authority neighborhoods in particular.
Mm-hmm.
How can those folks nominate without the association?
All right, so I'm still working with the Office of Equity to make those final determinations on how we might do that. I believe Southside may also be another neighborhood without a formal organization as the other ones have. But we want to just make sure that everyone feels that that the right representation is on the commission. And so the city will be helping me with those final determinations on who we will identify and pinpoint to be responsible for submitting those nomination forms.
What about other Black folks who may not live in those affected neighborhoods currently? Is there a space for them?
So it is, so long as the neighborhoods make the decision to nominate those individuals. Once again, the representatives will be totally up to the neighborhood organizations, no matter where they may reside. They have identified those individuals as their representatives on the commission. Of course, the applications will be open to anyone. The vetting is a little different because we will be looking at experience in those impact areas, so that we can couple that with those who have actually been impacted by systemic racism as well. So we're hoping that between the nomination process, the vetting process that's at the discretion of the neighborhood organizations, and the applications themselves, that everyone will feel that they have that opportunity.
Okay.
And if I could add, we're looking at, I think, the commission's role really as a conduit, that they are going to be receiving information and processing and digesting And we're hoping that this commission will be reflective of the concerns and issues of the entire community. So I think it goes back to the question that you asked, Gwen, is how will others be able to participate? We really want to make a lot of opportunities available to the broader community, as well as the commission actually listening to the broader community's issues and concerns. And I guess Deborah hasn't probably worked out all the details yet, and want to leave some of those decisions up to the commission as well. But we certainly want to utilize Brenda's dual kind of experience of being in kind of a community liaison. So you're very connected with the neighborhoods. And we definitely don't think that just because you don't have a formal organization that you can't participate or nominate. That's not what we want to do.
What if a person was very interested but had not participated in any association event, so they wouldn't know how to reach out? Can we make public a list of individuals to reach out to per neighborhood so that individuals can say, hey, I haven't been as involved, but I think this is my chance to really get involved. I want to reach out and nominate myself.
Absolutely. I think that is a great suggestion, and I could certainly see that as a part of the public announcement on October 18th. And we will also share that information during our meetings and information sessions as well.
Councilwoman Roney.
Ms. Jones, this is Kim Roney, and I have two things that I've been asked to remember and to lift up today. One is what I have heard my colleagues say about ensuring there's an opportunity for every Black voice to be heard. But the second, I did bring this up in the check-ins as well, is I've been asked to name Montford and Stumptown among the neighborhoods that have been impacted by urban renewal and redlining, so they're not forgotten in the list.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think I do have that on the list as well. Thank you.
I just have one last comment I'd just like to insert in the conversation. A lot of our neighborhood associations, a lot of times they represent one generation of our community members. And we're looking for diverse voices and diversity in thinking. So I would just like to suggest to any neighborhood associations listening to make sure that generational dynamic is felt.
Absolutely. And if I could just add to that, we, in the guidelines and procedures, we have a list of considerations. We're certainly not looking to control the neighborhood organization's process, but diversity with age is one. And certainly in other areas too. So just something to consider.
And in light of some of the conversations we've had here, that was the reason why I was concerned about the time frame as far as taking applications and the time frame that's open. I think with everything that's being said here, if there is a need for the communities to start talking about the process first before we can actually come up with nominees. So therefore, that's the reason I think maybe if we could start having conversations for a month and delay that another month before we start nominations, because people don't really know who to nominate until they really get into seeing what's going on in the communities, how people are responding. Then you can sort of start figuring out if that's something you'd like to do or your neighbor, you think your neighbor could do it. Because right now, I think if anyone made nominations, they're only going to be made by what they've already feel without, having the input of the other people. So that's just a suggestion.
I appreciate that. And certainly, just given the timeline, as we meet with these neighborhood groups and hear back from them, as we discuss the timeline, we will certainly, take that to heart and make whatever adjustments are necessary, once again, for them to have the time that they need to do it right.
So Mayor, I don't think that there are any additional questions. I don't see any additional hands raised. So again, thank you for giving us this time. Deborah, thank you so much. Looking forward to working with you. Thank you, Brenda. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Jones and Brenda Mills. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to the public hearings portion of our agenda. And the first thing we've got to do is continue a whole bunch of things to the November 9th meeting. And these are the corridor studies for Tunnel Road, Hendersonville Road, and Biltmore Avenue and McDowell Street. And unfortunately, they each require a vote to continue them. So I'm going to begin with the first one. Do I have a motion and a second to continue the public hearing to consider adoption of a corridor study for Tunnel Road until November 9th, 2021?
This is Kim, so moved.
Shanika, second.
Anybody? Okay, thank you.
We have a motion by
Okay,
Kim.
I'll do a roll call vote. All right. Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Okay, do I have a motion and a second to continue the public hearing to consider adoption of a corridor study for Hendersonville Road until November 9th, 2021?
This is Antoinette, so moved.
I'll second.
Okay, and I'm learning that I'm still all super glitchy, which explains why you guys are taking so long to answer me. So they're gonna try to fix it, but we'll keep going. Myself, I. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Okay, do I have a motion and a second to continue the public hearing to consider adoption of a corridor study for Biltmore Avenue and McDowell Street until November 9, 2021?
This is Kim, so moved.
This is Gwen, second.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Next, we have in public hearing item D, we have two public hearings related to 130 Charlotte Street, a public hearing to consider a land use incentive grant to Cassinger Development Group for 130 Charlotte Street. For folks watching, this is the old Fuddruckers site. And a public hearing to consider conditionally rezoning 130 Charlotte Street from Community Business 1 District to Commercial Expansion - Conditional Zone. Folks, we're going to have presentations on both of those pieces, and we're going to take public comment on both of them, and then we're going to vote on them separately. So first, we'll hear from Community Development Director Paul D'Angelo, and he'll present on the land use incentive grant to Cassinger Development Group for 130 Charlotte Street. And then we'll hear from Principal Planner Shannon Tuck, and she'll present on the zoning piece of it.
All right, good evening, City Council, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Management. Paul D'Angelo with the Community and Economic Development Department, here to talk about the land use incentive grant application for the Cassinger Development Group at 130 Charlotte Street. We have a staff report with staff recommending the approval of the application for the land use incentive grant for KDG for 130 Charlotte Street. And I'm going to highlight a few things from the staff report regarding the land use incentive grant. For review, this is a residential rental development, mixed use with 186 total rental units, 167 one bedrooms and 19 two bedrooms, with housing representing a majority of the overall rentable square footage. Of the 186 residential units, 37 rental apartments, 20%, will be affordable, serving individuals and families earning at or below 80% of the area median income, with half of those units, 19, accepting housing choice vouchers and rental assistance for individuals and families at or below 60% of area median income for a minimum of 20 years. Please note the Cassager Group is offering 30 years of affordability with this land use incentive grant application. There's an estimated tax value of the property upon completion of nearly $27 million, and the project as presented to staff meets eligibility requirements for the land use incentive grant. Per the LOED scoring matrix and based upon policy, the project will receive 40 total points for affordability, 20 points for the location, and an additional 20 points for energy efficiency for a total score of 80 points. Per the policy, this will equal 16 years of grants in the amount of city property taxes payable on the 130 Charlotte Street development on those improvements. The proposal does include that affordable rental housing, the rental acceptance of rental assistance and housing choice vouchers, superior location efficiency, energy efficiency as well with energy efficiency and Energy Star certification, solar panels for the common areas. And again, staff has scored this with 80 points for 16 years of the land use incentive grant. A few pros to this project. The proposed project will provide 37 affordable rental units in our community. The proposed project addresses the pressing need for affordable one-bedroom apartments with approximately 32 one-bedrooms and 5 two-bedrooms for a total of 37 affordable units. A proposed project will have an affordability period of 30 years. And Cassager will communicate with the Asheville Housing Authority and others that are accepting housing choice vouchers and rental assistance as the development prepares to come online. Regarding a fiscal impact, for the 16 years and 37 affordable units at or below 80% AMI, with again 19 of those for housing choice vouchers at or below 60% of area median income, the city will grant back a total of $1.5 million over the 16 years of the land use incentive grant, which equals approximately $40,000 per unit of subsidy, which is lower than the estimate of up to $80,000 in subsidy for 80% AMI homes, as noted in the council work sessions and a subsidy cap notated in the LOED policy. After 16 years, the city will receive approximately $109,000 annually in city tax revenue, depending on future property tax increases, et cetera. Please note that the city will still receive property taxes of approximately $14,500 in years 1 through 16. And the city does set aside a budget annually for the land use incentive grant. Staff is recommending a motion to approve the land use incentive grant for 130 Charlotte Street. And we have both, which are probably going to wait till the end, we have both the developer as well as a representative here to answer any questions. And I'm happy to take any questions now or after the full presentation with planning. Thank you.
Hey, how's my sound? Am I doing okay? Can you hear me normal? Okay, good. Okay. Gwen.
Paul, thank you for that question. Did this go through? So this is just, HCD was the only one that has to look at this? And it was unanimous? Okay, I just wanted to clarify. I didn't know whether it went through other committees or not.
That's correct.
Thank you.
This is a stage discussion around whether other committees should weigh in. So good point to bring up. I just wanted to share that this is a developer that we've worked with in the past, which I think is great. I know we're going to hear more about the project, but this is the same developer that built the apartments at 360 Hilliard next to the Aston Tennis Park. And while it suffered some setbacks in the beginning and orchestrating how we might partner together, it's really great to see an affordable housing developer return to partner with the city for another time. So I'm really thrilled to see this application in general. Paul, can you talk a little bit about for those listening at home, what happens? So we've got a new building. It's going to have 37, potential affordable units. And when it starts out, those 37 units will be identified. But there's a thing that happens throughout a project, just kind of attrition and leases. And as people sometimes economically improve and they qualify for the affordable units, it seems that the units tend to bounce around the development, which is something I really like and thought the public might like to hear, because it's not like these units are being, small and in the basement or in the back corner or something. They really are sporadically throughout the building over time. And I also thought it was interesting, and maybe you could speak to this. I think I understand that if a tenant is qualified for the affordable unit and they do improve economically, they are given a point in time, about a 4-month kind of warning, like, hey, you have surpassed the income that qualifies you for this particular unit. You have, 120 days or so to let us know if you would like to start paying market rent or if you would like to relocate, and thereby making sure that these units stay with folks that really need to afford them. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct on both points there, that the units are spread throughout the building. So there's no concentration of lower and moderate income. And then through natural attrition, those units tend to bounce around within the unit. And then, yes, working with council when we updated the land use incentive grant policy in June, once you're over 80% AMI, you can stay in that affordable unit up until 100 to 20% of area median income. And then, so that gives everyone a window there for wealth building and the opportunity for savings. And then if you're over 120% AMI, we ask that our partners like the Kessinger Group do that rental lease check 4 months before the lease is up. So if they are over that income, they have 4 months to make the decision instead of an immediate decision that might happen. As soon as somebody went over 80%, we have that window of area median income as well as that window of time.
That's great. Terrific. Thank you. And just one last comment, and that is to say for those folks listening at home, when we talk about 60 AMI, the math on that is someone working for $15 an hour, 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year equals 60 AMI, essentially, in this example in our community right now. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thanks, sorry. So Paul, I note that it's a 30-year commitment to affordability, and normally, and I think the LaWeege requires a 20-year. So are you basically saying that this developer is agreeing to a 50% increase in affordability, basically from what is being incentivized under the LaWeege grant?
That's correct. And it's something that we hope to see with, to Councilwoman Turner's point, of repeat customers as we build relationships to kind of ask for a little bit more the next time. And Kessinger Group, instead of the 20, 80, and 60 and 20, it's a 20, 80, and 60, 30. And so we're grateful as the folks come back, we try to push a little bit more, whether it's more affordability, more years, et cetera. That Kessinger came back with the 30 years.
Kim?
Thank you, Paul. I think the best way I know how to ask this question that's coming from community members is our grant based on the taxable value of the land or the end sale price of the land? And if the reason I'm asking that is, will our grant number go up or does it stay at what it's contracted?
So it's based on taxable value, and it is out of the gate here an estimate. But when we actually go to contract and the building is complete and we finalize those documents, like a deed restriction, this land use incentive grant document that's filed, we will look at that final taxable value to see how close that estimate was. But based on that final value is what we will base that grant upon.
So following up on that, it's my understanding the last time that this property was reviewed, it was currently valued at 3.6, but now it is expected to be above 5. So I guess my question around that is, what numbers are we setting ourselves up for the future? Should we be setting it on the taxable value?
So we'll look at the taxes once this is formalized with City Council, what the taxes are paid now on that property and the current tax value. And then when those agreements come about, we'll look at that full tax value of right now estimated at 27 million and that difference. Right now, they're paying city taxes of approximately 15,000. It's estimated that that will be, what is that total? Estimated after that the taxes will come in at approximately 109,000. So that difference of 94,000 is what is granted back after they pay those taxes. And again, based on current estimates.
Thank you, Paul.
Sage. Sage, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to follow up with Councilwoman Whistler to let her know the Luigi application actually only approved them for 16 years. So they're essentially almost doubling the term, which I think is great. It's almost 90% longer. And they don't have to. So I saw that as an additional thing that they put forward, and I greatly appreciate that.
Does anyone else have any questions for Paul before we move on to hearing from Shannon Tuck regarding the zoning piece?
This is Kim. I just want for the public benefit to know what happens if a project like this comes in significantly over budget. Does it need to come back to council before the contract is finalized?
I may refer to Brad Branham for that, but for right now, as we come in, we're about to look at 360 Hilliard as an agreement. I believe that we would certainly want to update everyone where that final tax value came in. And of course, we don't want to go over that cap that City Council created of not more than 80,000 per unit. But probably we could write into an update about how we go from estimate to final value, Councilwoman Roney.
Thank you for that consideration.
And I think I can add on to that if the final tax value comes in greater than the original estimate, which I believe might be your question, the amount of subsidy would potentially go up, but the tax value went up, which means that the net effect to the city is essentially the same because it's money that would have come in and then is essentially granted back. So they would essentially receive a greater grant back only if the tax value was greater. So the receipts and that money going back out at the grant would remain equal regardless of the final amount. So the net effect to the city should be exactly the same.
And I am curious as we look through and analyze how these Luigi grants are working as they're finalized. The big picture I think would be important for the public to see is if we were to be partnering with groups that have permanently affordable housing as their mission, would we get farther in per unit than what we are attempting to do now? So I think it'll be important for us to look back on this and review.
Councilwoman Roney, I agree. You know, the Luigi hasn't been successful until recently, so we don't have too many projects to look back and monitor, but I think it's a great idea for both Affordable Housing Committee and HCD to really kind of, see how these things are playing out as time passes and taxes change. I appreciate that suggestion.
Yeah, I just chiming in there. I mean, I have heard some wide-ranging opinions about incentivizing affordability through a tax grant program. I mean, just throwing it out there, is it better to have less numbers of units of affordable, less affordable units total if the developer just provides it as part of what they're doing without any city subsidy? Or conversely, if we subsidize units and get many more out of the developer, is that a greater benefit? I mean, I think when we adopted this policy, we said we think it's worth trying to bring online additional affordable units through a subsidy. But I think the Luigi grant that we're talking about here has been tweaked and tweaked and tweaked because it is a difficult tool to get it right. And the market is always changing. So what private developers are willing to do it changes from year to year. So, you know, and for those listening, I mean, I'm not sure how many cities even have a program quite like this. So it's not exactly like we can benchmark against all other places and see how we're doing. We're just trying to figure this out as we move along. But I'm pleased to see in this project that we're even seeing some units at 60% of AMI. That you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall seeing that anytime recently. So
it's probably worth mentioning too that when we say as a part of the policy for Luigi that half of the units will accept vouchers, it really can touch as low as 30% AMI. It's a range of 30 to 60, and there's no way for us to know right now which will fall on, but it could actually impact even lower AMIs.
Appreciate it. But you know, to Councilwoman Roney's point, I mean, that is another question, you know, looking at what is the best use of subsidy period or incentive period, you know, really what gets us the most bang for our buck, I think is, you know, the question. And if there are nonprofit builders that are ready, waiting, and able to do this work, you know, I mean, I think that's worth analyzing, and I'm sure Paul and his staff are trying to keep track of that, and you know, maybe at some point we'll be able to sort of reflect back and look and see what we think really made the most sense.
And if I may, Mayor, quickly, this is Paul. I took myself off camera. Hopefully you can hear me. My internet's acting up a bit, but we definitely in community development, it's very important for us to partner with all developers interested in affordable housing, mission-driven, nonprofit, tax credit, and for-profit. They all need different values of subsidy. A nonprofit might come forward where they're not going to pay property taxes naturally as a nonprofit agency if they're the owner. So what is their subsidy? So we do try to evaluate that. That said, these important points of keeping track of the subsidy, the numbers, the partners, and like the affordability is well taken, and I greatly appreciate the questions.
Thanks. Okay, if there aren't any other questions for Paul, let's hear from Shannon Tuck before we go to public comment. She will magically appear on our screen here probably any minute.
Hi, good evening. I'll just wait a moment to get the presentation queued up. All right, good evening, Mayor, City Council. This item, as the mayor had described, is a conditional zoning request for the same property just discussed. It's the property located at 130 Charlotte Street. And if you're not familiar with this area of town, it is the intersection of Charlotte Street and East Chestnut, just north of the downtown. You can see the subject property highlighted in red on the Exhibit A and A1 maps. The existing zoning designation of this property is Community Business 1. The request is to rezone the property to Commercial Expansion Conditional Zone. And the reason the applicant is requesting this is because they are proposing a mixed-use multi-story building that is over 100,000 square feet and over 50 units. This classifies the project as a level 3, and under the city's rules, any projects that are classified as level 3s must seek a conditional zoning to one of the expansion districts. Because this project has a mix of uses, it is predominantly a residential building with 186 units, but it does include some ground level retail and office use. So we need a designation that allows both, and that would be the commercial expansion zoning designation. Next slide, please. So the site is 2.34 acres. And it falls within some other designations that I think are worth noting. First of all, it falls within the Charlotte Street overlay. So you can see the overlay in the map on the left is hatched in gray, and the subject property located there in the lower left-hand side of that overlay. It's the large parcel that has the building kind of oriented on an angle. So that is our subject property, and as you can see, it's right on the edge of the overlay. Now, the Charlotte Street overlay is a separate set of zoning standards that apply to properties that are along this corridor. They are, those standards apply to by right projects. This is a conditional zoning, and all conditional zonings can seek exceptions or modifications to those development requirements. To the underlying zoning designation, it would apply to the overlay as well. The overlay standards are somewhat reflective of the Charlotte Street corridor plan. This is an old small area plan or corridor plan that was adopted before the former comprehensive plan. It's circa late 1990s. I think 1999 is when that plan was adopted. We have since gone through, we're on our second comprehensive plan since that plan was adopted. The slide on the right shows the Charlotte Street Innovation District. This significantly overlaps the overlay, but does extend a little bit further to the south. As you can see, it's the area highlighted in red. The Innovation District is one of several in the city of Asheville that is an economic development strategy that proposes to catalyze or incent development in locationally efficient areas. And by concentrating development in these areas, it helps reduce infrastructure costs to the city and has other benefits as well. Next slide, please. The property is also located within the Chestnut Hills National Historic District. It may be a little bit hard to tell on your screen, but Charlotte Street sort of bisects or kind of cuts in half the historic district. So you've got about a third of the historic district is on the east side of Charlotte Street, and about 2/3 is on the west side of Charlotte Street. So this property is kind of dead in the center. And the Chestnut Hills National Historic District, it's as I mentioned, it's a national historic district. It's not a local historic district, but it is every bit as historic as our local districts. The main difference is that the community chose not to adopt district-specific guidelines that would affect new construction or significant renovations. Next slide, please. And then the last designation that we'll talk about is the future land use map designation. The future land use map is part of the city's comprehensive plan and identifies about a dozen different designations. And this property is designated traditional corridor. And the traditional corridor description describes development that has sort of a Main Street feel, a minimum of 2 stories. It doesn't cap the height. It just says a minimum of 2 stories, and that the height and mass should be reflect area plans or sort of the site context. The traditional corridor also describes pedestrian orientation, a project that sort of de-emphasizes surface parking, so parking should be to the side or rear or structured underneath, and something that has multimodal accessibility, so bike lanes, wide sidewalks, transit, things of that nature. Because this project incorporates all or most of those elements, we do not feel a change in the future land use map is necessary. So a change in the zoning, but a change in the future land use map would not be required. Next slide, please. So in looking at the aerial imagery, you can see the site as it is today. The property, while in a historic district, the structure that is currently there is the former Fuddruckers fast food restaurant, if you're familiar with that. The business and the building have been vacant for some time, and the building is not a contributing historic structure. So removing that building or redeveloping the site does not affect the integrity of that historic district. You can see the building there located in the middle. It's surrounded by a large surface parking lot. All of this would be removed in order to make room for the new development. Next slide, please. So here's the site plan for the project, and what is being proposed is a 3 to 5 story building that will be a maximum of 52 feet in height. It is approximately 167,000 square feet total. That would include 186 dwelling units, 20% of which are set aside as affordable units. The project will also include approximately 7,000 square feet of street level non-residential space. That includes approximately 4,500 square feet of retail or other service uses. That's the area that's highlighted in red on the corner. And an additional approximately 2,500 square feet or so of sort of office space. There's also some leasing and amenity area on that ground level, but we generally consider that residential space or space that supports the residential uses. This project will also include the structured parking. There are 2 levels of below grade structured parking that totals 231 parking spaces. That is in excess of what is required for this project. There are also 7 on-street parking spaces that are created as a result of this project, and those are public parking spaces in addition to a loading zone. So these are spaces that are available to anybody in the community. There are also 10 to 12 foot wide sidewalks and a 5 to approximately 8.5 or 9 foot planting strip, and a transit shelter added to the stop that is currently on Charlotte Street. Today, we have just an open bench on Charlotte Street that would be replaced with a fully covered transit stop. I'd like to pause here too and just point out this project has gone through something of an evolution. When it was first presented at TRC, there were a few concerns that we had to talk with the development team about. The first was that the parking garage entrance, which is currently located on East Chestnut, it's about halfway down, or it's just past that retail space on the southern end of the southern end of the building. It had originally been proposed to be located on Charlotte Street. And this was concerning for a few reasons, one of which is that that is the most visible facade of the building, and having a parking garage entrance just sort of interrupts the architecture along that facade. It's not the most attractive. It also had the potential to create conflict. The traffic impact study that was required for this project in reviewing or considering an entrance on Charlotte Street required or recommended that there be a dedicated left turn section of the center lane today. So today we have the 3 lanes, one going in each direction, then we have the center turn lane. The traffic impact study recommended that a portion of that center turn lane be dedicated for a left turn only into the garage. So that would mean movements going in the opposite direction couldn't occur, and it would mean potentially that if traffic backed up in that lane with people trying to turn left at the light, that it could potentially create conflict there as well. Also, with the investment that we made in the Charlotte Street road diet, we really didn't want to interrupt the bike lane. So having a full access, full movement entrance to a parking garage potentially creates conflict with bicyclists in the bike lane. So this wasn't ideal. And our preference was to move it to the East Chestnut side, if that was possible. Another change that we asked the applicant to really study was they had originally proposed what was sort of a split pedestrian zone. We had the 10-foot wide sidewalk sort of split so that a portion of that was kind of down at the grade, at the road level, following the grade of the road, and then the other half of it sort of being along these kind of storefront entrances on Charlotte Street. And that's just not ideal, having these sort of topographically separated pedestrian zones. You see that sometimes in flood areas where it's more necessary because of elevating a project out of the floodplain. But in this case, that was just really awkward. I believe it may have been a function somewhat of that parking garage entrance being on Charlotte Street, so that by perhaps moving it to East Chestnut, it might help resolve that as well. And then the third change had to do with the architectural style. The building originally was proposed as sort of in the English Tudor style, so the style that you commonly find in Biltmore Village. There are a couple examples in the Chestnut Hills district that are of that style, that sort of English Tudor style. But that is not the dominant character of the Chestnut Hills Historic District. So in consulting with our historic preservation staff, we recommended that the applicant look at either the shingle architectural style, which if you're familiar with the the Princess Anne, that's the shingle style. So being a residential project, we thought that could be appropriate here. Another option was to look at the brick commercial buildings that are across the street on East Chestnut. Those are the buildings that include the City Bakery and the Chop Shop, and that could possibly be another historically appropriate architectural style that would work here. So the applicant, with those requests from staff, went back to the drawing board, and they came back with the project that is before you now. So that That entrance, the parking garage entrance on Charlotte Street did get moved to East Chestnut. The interrupted or the two different pedestrian zones also got resolved. And we have now a nice 10-foot wide unobstructed sidewalk that has smooth transitions to the primary entrances. And the architectural style was changed. Now the building did not change at all. The height, the mass did not change. In fact, it just got reduced just a tiny bit. But generally the layout, the orientation, the height, the mass, even the fenestration remained exactly the same. It's just sort of how the building was skinned that changed. So we went from that English Tudor to sort of that more commercial brick style. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the streetscape improvements. You saw in the previous slide that the applicant proposed community space in the center of the project. This is going to be private community space for the residents, but there are significant improvements to the public realm as well. If you look at an aerial map of the corridor as it relates to this property, there's very little room between the edge of pavement and the property line. So the applicant is using a portion of their property in order to provide an ample planting strip for street trees, a nice wide sidewalk, and a little bit of room for some additional flexibility. So streetscape or street section A is the Charlotte Street section. So if you are standing on Charlotte Street looking north, you have the building facade on your left. There's a plus or minus 5-foot strip that has foundation plantings, or this is a really good space for awnings, the canvas awnings that come off of a building, or utility boxes, or things that are commonly encroaching into our public sidewalks will not be a problem here because we've got that little 5-foot area that can help absorb some of that. Then we have our nice unobstructed 10-foot wide level sidewalk. And then next to that, we have our 5-foot planting strip. Because we do not have on-street parking on Charlotte Street, we prefer the continuous planting strip. It's better since we don't have people parking and kind of crossing that area. It's better for the trees, and it also separates the sidewalk zone from the faster moving traffic on Charlotte Street, so it's a more comfortable environment for the pedestrian. The street section B is the Chestnut Street section. So if you're standing on the sidewalk looking east at Charlotte Street, the building facade again is on your left. You've got your 10-foot wide sidewalk, and then you've got a 9-foot, it's sort of a bump out planting area. So for a portion of the facade along Chestnut Street, you have this bump out zone where you have your street trees and a nice wide sidewalk. This is the section that's in front of that retail area. Then it transitions to on-street parking. So the car that is behind the tree in that 9-foot zone, I believe that is meant to represent a parked car in the parallel parking spaces. So on that section, you still have the 10 or plus, or I think it's maybe even 10 to 12-foot wide sidewalk. And in this zone, your street trees move into tree grates, but you still have ample space for walking. And the traffic volumes on East Chestnut Street are less than what's on Charlotte Street. It moves a little bit slower. So it's not as bad to have the pedestrians next to the parked cars, which are next to the travel lanes. Next slide, please. So here are the building elevations for the project, starting with what I would consider the primary facade. This is the Charlotte Street facade. Now this is a corner building, so we really actually consider both Charlotte Street and East Chestnut to be fronts of the building, and they're both important from an aesthetic and pedestrian standpoint. But starting with the Charlotte Street facade, you can see on the left-hand side, that's the corner portion of the building, and you can see it's a 3-story building. It's a tall 3-story because the lower level is that retail or non-residential space. This is similar to those commercial buildings across East Chestnut where you have the Chop Shop and the City Bakery. Those are both 3-story buildings with a taller retail or ground level. The building then, as you move down Charlotte Street, kind of changes and transitions. It maintains a relatively uniform roof line or floor plates for each of the floors. But what happens is that taller retail level, as you move down, You drop slightly in elevation on Charlotte Street, and then also as that taller retail level transitions, you can kind of tuck in an extra story. So it goes from 3 stories to 4 stories to a different 4 stories with a little bump up at the top. And that bump up, you can see that is the light gray section of the building that has the vertical fiber cement paneling. That section is actually stepped back from the leading edge of the facade. So this is something that we commonly see in our downtown. And this is a good design principle that helps keep a building from feeling too tall or massive or overwhelming from the street. And in the downtown, we base that on the width of the right-of-way. And whatever that width is, establishes what we call a street wall height. And at that point, all of the square footage above that has to be stepped back. So this is not required in this case, but it is a good urban design principle that's been incorporated into this project. So we add a little additional square footage on that upper, for that upper portion. And then as you go down, we drop down to another 4-story, and then it transitions to a 5-story. This is the tallest portion of the building, that 5-story piece on the northern end. And as you can see, the roof line remains relatively consistent. Also, I should mention that in addition to having that horizontal variation in the roof line, which adds some interest to the building, there's some vertical variation as well. The different building sections sort of step back and forward depending on which section you're looking at. That also has the effect of breaking up the mass of the building, making it a little bit more visually interesting. It adds shadow to the project as you go through the day. So it just kind of helps overall with the feel of the building. Next slide, please. So turning the corner on East Chestnut now, again, on the right-hand side, that's the corner, the tall 3-story section of the building. You can see that ground level retail space there next to the corner. This is the portion that's got the bump out that will have the 9-foot green space with the trees. And then when you get past the parking garage, then it transitions back to the 10 to 12 foot wide sidewalk with street trees and grapes. You can see on this facade, this is a longer facade. So having that relief is really important. And on this facade, they've added balconies. You've got that same kind of vertical stepping back and forth. The roof also steps up and down as you go. And we transition from that tall 3-story to 4 stories down to 3 again as you get towards the back of the project. So as you go closer to the neighborhood or next to those office uses, the scale of the project drops and it becomes a 3-story building at the back. And you can see there's sort of a change in materials as well. We've got different brick colors. You've got the fiber cement on top and the metal glazing around the windows. And the parking garage entrance too, I should say, also has the effect of kind of breaking up that facade too, which is, I think it works better on this side than it did on Charlotte Street. Next slide. Turning the corner at the back of the building now, you can see it's that 3-story section. This is the section that is furthest down on Chestnut Street. Next slide. And this is the other long facade. This is the facade that's on the south elevation that's next to Taco Temple, if you're familiar with that business. And so you can see, again, you have the taller portion of the building up to Charlotte Street. Charlotte Street would be on the left-hand side of the building. And then it drops in scale as you move closer to the residential neighborhood to where it's a 3-story building. And you can see those bump up pieces, that extra story that gets added on a few sections of the building. In this section, you can see how it's stepped back from the facade, from the leading edge of that front facade. So that's what I was trying to describe earlier. Next slide. So with all conditional zonings, there are a set of project conditions that are binding that go with all approvals if this project were to be supported and the request or the ordinance adopted. We always try to identify the technical modifications with a conditional zoning and with those within that list of conditions. So in this case, we have some modifications to UDO standards. Primarily, it's the density. The commercial expansion district offers a density bonus of up to 50 units per acre if affordable housing is incorporated. So this project does include that affordable housing, so they are eligible for that density bonus. And there is still an exception though, because their density still exceeds, what the bonus would normally allow. But they do provide all of their parking on site, and they meet all of their other UDO requirements. There are some other exceptions to the Charlotte Street overlay. The overlay and the existing CB1 standards are somewhat consistent in that it limits the size, both in total square footage as well as the footprint and height of an individual building. It doesn't limit a total project square footage, just an individual building. And this building exceeds those limits. And so modifications are requested for those standards. The project, we also like to identify the mix of uses. Again, this is a predominantly residential building with 186 units, but there is some ground level retail and office and shared amenity space. I believe I heard we started with this project being 20% of the units will be dedicated affordable at 80% AMI for a minimum period of 20 years. I think I heard in the earlier presentation that may have changed, and now I think the affordability period may be 30 years now. If that's the case, we'll need to update the B1 conditions or the project conditions to reflect that. And as stated earlier, with the land use incentive grant, half of those units, that'd be 38 units for this project, half of those units would also accept housing vouchers, which that's a great bonus for a project like this.
Shannon, I don't know if you can tell that we have a few council members that have raised their hands.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And maybe Paul, though, could first give us the updated affordability numbers for Shannon's B1 conditions there. Could Paul do that, and then we'll get council questions?
Yep. So Paul D'Angelo here again with community development. We have for this project 37 affordable units with 19 of them accepting housing choice vouchers.
And what's the affordability period, Paul?
30 years.
30 years. So that's the part that I think we originally, when we first started discussing this project, the affordability period was 20 years, and that's now changed to 30. That is not reflected in the project conditions, so we'll need to update that.
And technically, not all of them are 80% of AMI either, since the housing choice vouchers goes to 30 to 60% of AMI for the
That's
19
correct.
Units.
Right. We typically word those conditions in a certain way so that it doesn't preclude some being at 80%. Our legal staff kind of help us with that, but I thought I heard the affordability period changed, and so I just wanted to make sure I highlighted that. Also, with this project, the applicant has voluntarily agreed to add a bus shelter to the Charlotte Street side. I mentioned that earlier. There is 18,000 square feet of community open space. That's the private community space that I mentioned, and that does not include all of the streetscape improvements. And then we had the 231 structured parking spaces, also the 7 on-street parking spaces. So I'll pause here, and it looks like there may be some questions.
Y'all, I don't know who. Gwen, go ahead. I can see.
Yeah, Shannon, I received a neighborhood letter, and I'm going to quote a few of these and just ask you to address them. So the first is that, let me see, hold on a minute, that the project, the conditional zoning has been fast tracking with the final vote by City Council scheduled for October 12th. And then the second comment that I'd like you to respond is the the design that was presented in the community Zoom call on May 18th, which has been drastically changed. So what I heard, now, I don't know whether community meetings and when you first looked at it were the same, but I would think they were. But what I heard you say that changed from the developer originally coming to you was that the parking garage opening changed from Charlotte Street to Chestnut, and that the facade changes, what it was going to look like changed, and that there were some what you would view as pedestrian experience improvements. And you actually said, I think, that the scope of the project actually decreased by a small amount, but decreased. Is that true? And would you characterize that as drastically changed as this neighborhood letter says?
Sure, I'm happy to address that. So at least regarding the first comment about fast tracking, I would have to go back and double check the application date, but I believe this was submitted back in May. So this project's been in review for quite some time. The applicant actually took some additional time midstream to kind of explore and address some of these concerns of staff after technical review.
And it has gone through all the required, like it's gone through planning and zoning, it's gone through, any steps being skipped here, Shannon, or?
No steps were skipped. It may help to explain that with all conditional zonings, we require a neighborhood meeting to occur prior to application. And the intent of this is to give the developer an opportunity to hear about concerns from the community and incorporate in that design before they get too far down the road. So that occurs before the application even comes in to the city. So my understanding is that that was the first time that the applicant revealed that sort of English tutor style. And I believe that was based on feedback from a much earlier proposal, like that came several years prior, that there was some feedback from the community that they wanted to see something more traditional. And so this is, that English tutor is what they came in with. But as I stated earlier, that was a concern to staff in that we felt like it was out of place. That character style was out of place on this corridor and also with the Chestnut Hills Historic District. So even though we don't have individual design guidelines for the Chestnut Hills Historic District, we still, for a conditional zoning especially, we want to support historic preservation goals and want something that is, compatible and harmonious. And so in consultation with our historic resources staff, those were the recommendations that we gave the applicant. Now, the building did not change at all. If anything, it got reduced slightly in scale. So in terms of impact on neighbors or the community, there was no change in impact. So we would not have deemed this a significant change that would say, for example, warrant a new neighborhood community meeting. So if an applicant came in and significantly changed their project after that first neighborhood meeting, the building's much taller, it's oriented differently, the mix of uses are very different, we would ask them to go back to the community. But in this case, there were no changes in the land uses, no changes in the mass, the orientation, the height, even the fenestration, as I mentioned, didn't change. The only changes were the three that I highlighted: the location of the parking garage entrance, the character of the streetscape, the pedestrian zones, and then, of course, the architectural detailing. Those we considered all positive changes and were at the staff's request.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this point?
This is Kim. I think I just mostly have a concern, and that's tied to what I was asking about earlier. In order to get to 1,000 units that are between 30 to 80% AMI, which are always going to be crawling further and further out of reach, we'd have to build 27 of these. And so I think we just can't go all in on this just to get scraps of what we need. acknowledging that right now this is not this project's problem so much as it's an internal problem. So I just want a commitment that we're going to look at the Luigi process and what we're getting out of it.
If we could just advance to the next slide, please. So in summary, staff does concur with the Planning and Zoning Commission and recommends approval of this project for the reasons stated in the staff report. And if we go to the next slide, I'd just like to end here. This is a rendering supplied by the applicant of what we expect the finished product of this building to look like. You can see sort of the brick character of the building, some of that relief, the vertical and horizontal plane relief that I was discussing, the step back of that uppermost story, the retail space at the ground level, the transit shelter, and the nice wide sidewalk and streetscape improvements that were included in this project. So I think this does a good job of sort of capturing what we expect this project to look like in the end. That concludes my introduction. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I know the developer and their design team members are on this meeting as well. So,
Sage?
Yeah, just in the interest of correct information out there, I did reach out to the local newspaper today because they printed a story digitally on this project that had some errors. And what happened is, I believe they're going to try and change it and hopefully before the print. But for those of you who are listening at home that may be renting and curious what these affordable units are, the numbers are actually for a 1-bedroom, 60 AMI. What was quoted in the paper was without utilities, but it actually included some utilities. So the 1-bedroom would be $739 with water, sewer, and trash included. It had no utilities, would be $665 a month. And for 80 AMI, 1-bedroom it was quoted as $1,021 without utilities, but that actually, again, includes some utilities. So if it includes water, sewer, and trash, it's the $1,021. Without that, it's $947. And hopefully, I won't go over the other numbers. I hope the paper will correct that, but just for those of you listening at home, and if you are able to go to some of these documents that are produced by staff, there is an appendix at the bottom that talks about the specific rents and incomes per AMI.
Okay. Council, if you have any other questions for staff, this is a good time, or for the developer and their team. I understand they're on the call. I cannot see all the boxes on my screen, so I don't know where they are, but they're here if we need them. Otherwise, I'll move to the public comment period. So just let me know if you're ready. We'll move to the public comment period. Okay. We do have a number of people signed up to speak for this item, and I'm going to turn it over. Actually, first I'm going to read a couple things, then I'm going to turn it over to staff. Okay, we're going to hear public comment on items D1 and D2. And again, to remind everyone, that is both the land use incentive grant piece of this, as well as the conditional rezoning application itself. We will connect live calls from our speaker queue. I believe we have about 12 people signed up to speak under this item. Callers, you will first hear staff inform council that you're next to speak. Then you will hear an automated message letting you know you're unmuted and live in the meeting. You may begin speaking after the automated message. If you accidentally drop out of the speaker queue, just redial the number and meeting code, press *3 to rejoin the speaker queue. You'll have 3 minutes to comment, and at the end of the 3 minutes, you'll hear a bell and staff will ask you to wrap up your comment. I will turn it over to staff now to take public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Our first caller is Will Hornaday.
President there, but that doesn't mean much. But I'm not calling in today to speak for our entire membership, but I ask as their representative that they, along with the neighboring communities and businesses along Charlotte Street, have their voices heard, like in the past, in the visioning of future development. And that, spurred the success that Charlotte Street is today, and the local businesses on the street and the nearby neighbors have elevated the corridor And that's because of the overlay, and that's what it was intended for. And that was working collaboratively with the city to create the overlay. But this project doesn't conform to the overlay as presented. And if the overlay has been outdated by 2 comprehensive plans, but remains in the UDO, we as a community are confused kind of on where this is going with our own zoning in our street that we all love. And, there's been ample time to tweak the overlay with the businesses in the community that more align with the current comprehensive plan goals, but that hadn't happened. And there was for the road diet, which I love. And at that time, there was some talk about changing the overlay, but staff moved on to Rad Tip or South Slope or there was another emergency, and nobody ever came back to us and addressed the community on something that we really worked hard on with city's help. And I think a project of this size and this scale and this massing deserves the same kind of inspection again. And it's not saying this is a bad, terrible project and this site should never be built on. We all know density's coming, and our community is going to benefit from additional housing and businesses. But I'd like to see this project denied or put on hold until residents and the businesses along the street are engaged like they were in the past on a project that diverges so dramatically in scale and mass from the current overlay that's in the UDO. And sort of what we have to go on that's what we expect from our city, is protection of that. But I would hope that the city kind of pauses for just a second and works with the community to get this to a place where at least everyone understands where the rails are. Because right now it doesn't feel like there's rails between this and another project that won't be mentioned. But it just feels like it's just open season and there's one thing. All right, my time's up. Thanks a bunch. And
Council, our next caller is Paula Coughlin. Paula, your line is now open.
Hi there. Thank you all for allowing me 3 minutes to speak. And I wanted to start first by recognizing how much work and how much effort goes in to kind of controlling and steering a project of this size. And I've seen how much work goes into trying to protect the community and collaborate when these projects have come up. And I'm speaking from my former residence in Florida, where things just completely went off the rails. And it made me a little gun shy. So I went looking for a neighborhood that was old and established and really seemed to honor its history and its culture and its architecture. And I was even more pleased to find that when I bought a home here in Albemarle, that there were so many zoning ordinances in place to protect my neighborhood. And that's all I'm really hoping to talk to you tonight about, is that with the Charlotte Street Neighborhood Association plan on a page and the Charlotte Street overlay and the UDO and all of the layers of oversight and work that go into the collaborative manifestation of this neighborhood, it's working. And I encourage you to stick with this collaborative between the neighborhood, the residents, and the developers. And just like Will was suggesting, maybe pause for a minute and look at the process of how this is unfolding here on Charlotte Street, because there are other big projects looming.
And my biggest fear is that it's really going to change the entire neighborhood feel and that ideal of having a village with businesses and residences and a close-knit community. And it's going to change, I think, most prominently when you look down the street and the traffic is going to be out of control. And we're not going to have a quaint little village anymore where businesses and families thrive, but we're going to have gridlock and we're going to have unsafe traffic conditions. And I just, I'm kind of speaking from the heart here, from past experiences and things that I can foresee are going to go wrong if we continue to build and develop with this kind of zeal that I see. And I'm encouraging all of our leadership to slow down a little bit and consider where we came from here on Charlotte Street.
Council, our next caller is Carolyn Warner.
Can I be heard? I hope.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I have been listening to this tonight, and one of the things that strikes me is that I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the developers are getting a 16-year multi-million-dollar grant to be able to construct 60% more units than the highest number of units they would be allowed to construct under the existing code. And my question is, in a hot market like this, isn't the developer making bank? This looks like a pretty good deal for the developer. And I am not opposed to development, and let me clearly state that. But what I am concerned about is that once you change the overlay, the UDO, you give conditional zoning, when does it stop and where does it stop? Charlotte Street is one of the spokes in the wheel of Asheville that really has a lot of historic character. And a development that is under consideration across the street from that currently has affordable housing. And I appreciate all your work in trying to create affordable housing. My question is, why can't the areas around Asheville that are already brownfields, gray fields, Tunnel Road, Patton Avenue, areas that have already been destroyed, be those areas to infill with affordable housing and keep the historic entrances like Charlotte Street the way it is, except, under the current UDO and the plan on a page. I don't agree that the applicant has revealed concerns from the neighborhood. I think that one of the issues we have been experiencing over this long process is that we have not felt heard. And let me tell you, I don't live on Charlotte Street, and I am not a resident of any of the areas around Charlotte Street. But what I am is somebody who did grow up here. I want to see the historic preservation of this area be considered in its strength, because it's not only a benefit to tourism, but it is also what has made this town and this city a unique place for people to come to. And there are areas we can satisfy a lot of those goals without it being here. And in my opinion, the reason City Bakery and Chop Shop works is because of the scale of its building. When you put something of that enormous scale across the street from it, it is not going to be a pretty picture. It just isn't. I came from Chapel Hill. It's happening all over Chapel Hill. It's gone. The character of Chapel Hill is done. And I really don't want Asheville to go down that road. There are areas that these can be concentrated on, but this is not where it needs to be. Charlotte Street can continue under the current UDO plan on the page, and the
Council, our next caller is Bill Murphy. Bill, your line is now open.
Okay, thank you. My name is Bill Murphy, and I live on Albemarle Road. I'm about a block from the project here. I want to thank you, Mayor and City Council, for giving us this opportunity to speak. I think after the previous project, a lot of people think that, in the community opposition, believe that we're totally opposed to any changes. And that's not true at all. In fact, I think apartments is a good use of that piece of land there. But I think you also have to take into account the UDO and the Charlotte Street overlay. I mean, people are purchasing homes, having faith in a zoning, and it seems like zoning doesn't matter. It can be changed at any time. And then people have to pick up and move again if they want that quality of life again. Concerned about the traffic, as Paula mentioned, it's going to be a nightmare. It's already bad on both Chestnut and Charlotte, and this is just going to compound it. Another, 186, 200 cars a day there. So that would, I think, that'd be very helpful if the city would direct the developer to work with the neighborhoods around there and try to come up with a better plan that will fit the scope of the neighborhood. And so I'm going to limit that. Just a few things. Last point is I think you should limit the size of this building to the UDO. I don't see any reason why it can't be 2 stories high. I like the changes that has the exterior match the shop rather than the one they had previously done. And then thirdly, I encourage you all to slow down a bit and let the community engage with the developer and see if we can come with a win-win. Thank you.
Council, our next caller is Richard Colbert. Richard, your line is open.
What do I need to do? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for conducting the hearing. I appreciate it. I am part of the process that began over 20 years ago in the area and in our neighborhood where a coalition of residents and business owners and city planners and city officials, you're all probably familiar, and attorneys all convened as practical visionaries regarding the future use and development of the Charlotte Street area. And so this engagement, civic engagement, was initiated and encouraged by Asheville city leadership, led to the legal creation of the UDO, the Charlotte Street Overlay District, the comprehensive Asheville plan. So this visionary process and plan that people engaged in was agreed and applauded, and it actually became the map for the future of Charlotte Street. So then we kind of fast forward to where we are now in the past year or so with 2 large development proposals coming up. And it feels like that you hear no recognition or no respect or appreciation for the fact of the history that's created the plan that's in place. And it seems like to grant conditional zoning permits in lieu of coming together and reconvening a process that involves the neighborhood, involves city officials, involves the people that are affected and interested, seems like that's where real leadership comes from. If there's a compelling reason to make changes in the plan as it now exists, it seems that it should come out of the same kind of body of people and process and participation that created the original plan. Otherwise, there's a severe notion of being overridden, not listened to, not really valued as a process of even going to the trouble to engage in a public process. And we're all very passionate. We love our city. We want to be involved in it. Nobody's saying, not in my backyard. We're saying this needs to be done carefully and in consideration with the same kind of support and integration that the overlay district that now exists took to create, that the comprehensive plan that took to create. This is a little bit too quick without actually perhaps the kind of changes that need to be made or the kind of changes that this project can address. And I think we're all realizing something will happen in Fuddruckers, and we're wishing to be a part of that process in a constructive, positive.
Council, our next caller is Eugene Ellison. Mr. Ellison, your line is now open.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council. I'm hoping you all can hear me. Appreciate the opportunity to appear before you. I appear before you on behalf of the Neighborhood Associations of Charlotte Street, and there are 4 of them that exist. And the letter that you received, which I think is well written and explains exactly where this neighborhood is coming from. I think the previous callers started with Mr. Hornaday and finishing with Corber there. Those are serious comments that come from a number of different neighbors, while all of them can't speak in an hour's meeting. I think the comments that they're making ought to be given serious consideration. First of all, when people buy property in a neighborhood, a lot of them do research what's going in their neighborhood and look at the future. And they do expect that when you spend time in community meetings and adopt ordinances along with the city, that they expect the city to follow those ordinances. Yes, there are occasions where things happen where variances are granted, but on this scale, this is a substantial change. One that should require the city, the Charlotte Street overlay, and the UDO to be amended prior to any decision being made. I think one of the points that they're trying to make is that if we're going to maintain any control over development in our city within the boundaries of the city of Asheville, we should be dictating to developers what we have talked about and what we have envisioned and what we know will work, so that our infrastructure will keep up with our development, and so that our development will complement the neighborhoods that existed for so many years. When you look at the plan, beautiful building, great project. If you hear the arguments made by the neighbors, not so much against the developer, but against the process where the neighbors met and you have a Charlotte Street overlay, you have a comprehensive plan. When the comments at the planning and zoning and comments are made that, well, in a perfect world, we could have made these changes, except the city doesn't have the resources to be able to, I really would like to understand how a quality city, and we do have a quality city, and you all do a great job, but to force a project in a neighborhood where they don't know where the future lies, and that is the concern. The next project that's coming, they need some commitment from you. They need some.
Thank you for your comments. That's your time.
Council, our next caller is Maria Lopez.
Hello, my name is Maria Lopez Ibanez, and thank you for having me be part of this meeting. I have not been on a meeting like this before, so I just want to make sure someone can hear me, if someone cannot or not. Okay. So, I live, can you guys hear me? Okay, thank you. That's all I needed. All right, I live on Broad Street off of Charlotte Street, directly behind Fuddruckers, the Fuddruckers site, behind the Fuddruckers building. My bedroom window looks out directly to the Fuddruckers building, as do many of my adjacent neighbors' windows. And as you can probably tell by where I live and what I've said, I have a personal interest in this development, but also a big picture interest in how development affects Asheville in general. I believe if you pass conditional zoning for this project, it sets the wrong precedent for the future development around Asheville residential neighborhoods. The Fuddrucker site is surrounded on many, many sides, on two sides, mainly by residential homes, and on one side by historic homes that are mixed-use offices, small businesses, and apartments. The way that the current developer plans are proposed, there is no buffer between commercial and residential zones. The developer's plans to build this new development pushes to each of the maximum edge of the property. So really what this looks like, if the conditional zone gets passed, is that, first of all, buildings are not set back from the property lines. They're set back 15 feet from the property lines. But so what that looks like is that you have one-story residential homes directly adjacent to 52 feet of brick monolith, okay? And also there's a scale involved. It's not just 52 feet or 5 stories. It's a breadth of scale that it's a monolithic facade. The other way that it looks is that the buildings are not set back or terraced. They're just right there adjacent to each of these residential units, right? So you'll have a one-story home next to a 5-story brick building. There also, when a development like this and looking at the plans, what happens is that there's insufficient landscape buffers to accommodate large deciduous trees. There's noise.
Council, our next caller is Vivian Worsel. Vivian, your line is now open.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for the opportunity to speak. I'm Dr. Vivian Worsel. I live right off Charlotte Street and Blair Street. And besides being a stakeholder, I'm a practicing audiologist and I teach hearing conservation. So my concerns are going to be a little bit more technical, but I don't know if you all have this type of information. I feel comfortable presenting. The impact increase of ambient noise flow with the increase of traffic. There was a study that was done. It was a federal study, and what they looked at, what was the adverse effect of neighborhoods with increase of traffic. In the study, they had 5 standards vehicle types: automobiles, medium trucks, heavy trucks, buses, and motorcycles. Voila, that is Charlotte Street. I know that because I can see the street from my house. That's the casserole we have in Charlotte. So for those up in physics, you should know that if you double a sound source, you double whatever the sound source is, you add 3 dB. You double that, you add another 3 dB. So if you keep doubling the amount of sound from traffic noise, the amount of dB goes up in that physics law of sound. Now, the problem with that is that trucks, if you throw a truck in the mix, it all bets are off. And 1 truck is equal to 10 cars. So when you try, whoever the acoustic engineer is, they have to do some special math that I'd like to see. There's also the inverse square law. The same thing works for there. That's physics. You double the distance from the sound source, and what happens is that the sound does decrease, but all bets are off if it's traffic. That doesn't apply. So the next thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the communication. What happens when you increase the ambient noise level? The squelch effect comes in, which is a cocktail party speech. We're a neighborhood that we sit on our porch and we cultivate relationships. I have a beautiful backyard, and that's what attracted me to my house. I go to Taco Temple. I sit outside with my neighbors. However, you increase that sound and the ambient noise, and the squelch effect comes in, which means the ability to listen to a message with a competing message. No one will be sitting outside relaxing. So that's a real big concern when you talk about the quality of life and issues. Another real quick is the wildlife concerns. Adverse effects of traffic noise on wildlife merits further investigation. There are serious concerns about noise interfering with wildlife, communication, migration, reproduction. The target travels through wildlife areas, and do you have the adequate tools to evaluate related impacts and abatement? Safety, oh my gosh, I take my life in my own hands going to Taco Temple, crossing the street or going to Dr. Luke. So safety is a big issue.
Thank you for your comments, caller. That is your time.
Council, our next caller is Gary Davis.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council members, my name is Gary Davis, and I live with my wife in the Charlotte Street neighborhood, about 2 blocks from the proposed development. I'm an Asheville-based attorney practicing environmental and land use law, and I did provide some detailed written comments, which I hope you've had the opportunity to review. I'm going to take my limited time to focus on a couple of points. First of all, I want the City Council to think about the position that you're being asked to adopt here. You're being asked to adopt the position that conditional zoning can override an overlay district. And if you look at the UDO, it specifies what happens when overlay district regulations conflict with those for underlying zoning districts. And make no mistake about it, the conditional zoning to, in this particular case, to the commercial mixed use is an underlying zoning district as is specified in the UDO. But if that's the case, if it's the case that conditional zoning can supersede an overlay district, then what happens in the hotel overlay district that City Council recently spent a lot of time and effort on? Can conditional zoning come in to the hotel overlay district and supersede the public benefits that are required and all the conditions that are required for a new hotel in the hotel overlay district? I don't think that's right under the UDO. There's nothing in the UDO that provides that commercial expansion districts can override overlay district standards, and an overlay district cannot become an underlying district as a result of conditional zoning. The UDO is clear on that. So you've heard how the conditional zoning in this case conflicts with the UDO and particularly with the overlay district standards. It would result in a building that's 7 to 9 times bigger than the building sizes permitted in the transition overlay, and a building that's 2 times as high as permitted. So I've set this out in our written comments, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I do want to address affordable housing briefly, because the existing zoning does provide incentives for affordable housing, and you could achieve almost as many units with the existing zoning, and the overlay district also incentivizes affordable housing. So there's no need to jump into a conditional zoning and throw out the UDO as it's written in order to provide for affordable housing. And finally, I want to address a point that Ms. Tuck made about the consistency with the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan and the future land use map. Just if I can just briefly state this, please look at the
Council, our final caller for this item is Tristan Keys. Tristan, your line is now open.
All right. Mayor, Vice Mayor, esteemed City Council members. Again, thank you all so much, first of all, for everything you all do for our city. I would not envious of your position. I live on Baird Street, right off of Charlotte Street, just up the hill from Fuddrucker site. And as a local person who lives right in the immediate area, I want to add my voice to the growing list of people who live in this immediate area who are just not in favor of the project as it stands. Y'all have heard a lot of fantastic, eloquent arguments already by folks who have called in. I don't think I have a whole lot to add, just to reiterate everything that they've said. But also to say the people who live in this area, we want to be excited about a project. We want to be in support of it. And right now, it does not have the support of the community, the local community, the people who live in the immediate area. And so we want to be excited. I've got 3 kids. I would love to be excited about a project where I feel safe and comfortable, walking down the street with my kids one day. But right now, as it stands, it's not what's presented. So again, I would just reiterate everything that's been said so far. Again, thank you all so much for everything you do for our city. But I would encourage you to vote no on the project as it stands. Thank you so much.
Do we have any other callers in the queue?
No, Mayor, that's all.
Okay, I will now close the public hearing. Before we, and I see we've got a couple hands raised, I just, some of the things I heard, if I could just ask a couple questions of staff, and then I'll ask you guys what your questions are. Shannon, do we have any, we heard a little bit about traffic and the potential traffic increase from this project. Do we have any concept of the traffic that Fuddruckers generated when it was operational? I think it had a lunch and dinner service versus the traffic generated by an apartment complex of this size. Do we have any notion about how that compares?
That is a great question. That would be great data to have. I do not have that information. I believe Ken Putnam, our traffic engineer, is standing by. Maybe he just knows roughly how those two uses compare. I'm not really sure. But I do know.
So maybe
I do know that a high turnover restaurant like Fuddruckers would also require a traffic impact analysis. I mean, that has come up in other projects. So I think they're both traffic generators. So it could be somewhat comparable, but I'm not clear.
I think Ken just popped up. Ken, are you there?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I don't have specific data, but I would say that for a Fuddruckers type restaurant, of course, its main peak would have been in the lunch peak hour for sure, and also probably the evening peak hour, compared to, we'll say, essentially an apartment complex or somewhere you live. The peaks would be the AM peak and then the afternoon peak, not the lunchtime peak. I do know that Fuddruckers has been there for a good number of years. It was a very popular place. And so it's safe to say that the traffic volumes during the lunch hour were probably pretty equivalent to what they could possibly be with this project. I would note that some of the concerns that I heard in the public hearing was other projects that may come down, the road in the future. But that's the only data that I have, because I think the Fuddruckers have been there so long that when it was approved, I'm not even sure if a traffic study was required at the time, but it definitely would be if we were to look at another Fuddruckers today.
And if I recall, our highest traffic counts on Merriman and Charlotte are during the lunch time period, if I recall that.
Yes, I think that's, as far as the peak goes, I would definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, I'm surprised to learn that. Thanks, Ken.
Yes, ma'am.
One other question that came up about a house on Broad Street, Shannon, that backs up to this project. Can you talk about what buffering would, I think I saw it on the site plan that there is buffering, landscape buffering planned for the project, between the project and the backside of Broad Street housing?
Yeah, and I probably should have taken a moment to point that out on the site plan. The The illustration that I showed earlier is just sort of a colored graphic rendering. The actual technical document's kind of busy looking, so it's a little bit chaotic to try to decipher. But there is a 30-foot landscape buffer between this project and the adjacent residentially zoned properties. The same kind of buffer would not be required between this project and the commercially zoned properties, and it is adjacent to some of those as well. However, this project still provides not 30 feet, but maybe 20 feet or so of buffering adjacent to those uses as well. And that's a mix, that landscape buffer is a mix of evergreen and deciduous trees and large and small and evergreen and deciduous shrubs. So it's a pretty dense buffer.
And on the Broad Street side, I've noticed just walking that neighborhood a lot that some of the housing there has changed. So some is single family home, but it looks like there are also some multifamily, buildings, I think, on Broad Street on that backside as well at this point. I don't know if you know.
There is a little bit. So the properties that are closest to Charlotte Street have gone through their own conditional zoning process to allow, there was a project just before council, I think in the last 6 months or so, or this last year for a conditional zoning. That project has not broken ground, but when it does, I think it was 4 stories and had a mix of office and residential uses. So this project would be directly adjacent to those properties as well. So yes, more and more mixed use and sort of mid-scale multifamily are kind of coming into some of these infill area opportunities.
Okay, thanks. And I think Antoinette had her hand up.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I guess this question, well, actually I have 2, probably for Paul. First is this the highest earning census tract? And secondly, when was the last time we've approved affordable housing in this census tract?
So I can do a quick search on that, Councilwoman Mosley, but I do believe it's one of our higher income census tracts. I can do a quick HUD search on that and check that out. I am not aware, Shannon might be able to help me out too, of any affordable housing that's been up in this neighborhood, particularly that I'm aware of at this time, since I've been with the city for nearly 4 years.
So there are 2 projects, the 2 conditional zoning projects on Broad Street that I just referred to that are the mixed use 3 to 4 story buildings. They did include some affordable housing, but it was very small, like 1 unit, 2 units. I think one project had 1 or 2 units. The other one had 2 or 3 units. So just a very few numbers. The other more significant in size affordable housing project would be the Larchmont on Merriman. So not right in this neighborhood, but not
and
too
when was
far
that?
away.
When was that, Larchmont? How long ago? Do we remember? Many, many years ago?
Larchmont was 2009. I remember it well. It was like the first, yeah.
I was going to guess 10 years. So.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I think Sage had her hand up.
Sorry, I had a little mute problem. I'm just curious for staff, and maybe Ken, since he's with us, when we were reviewing and hearing from community members on the last large project on the street, it was consistently brought up that they thought, as residents of the area, there were some simple improvements that could be made to the traffic lighting. And I'm just wondering when, as a community, we review this for their sake. I think the example I recall the most was that if you were driving down Chestnut towards Merriman from Charlotte, there is not a left turn green signal for going left on Merriman, which apparently creates some kind of congestion in the area. So, whether that intersection is a problem or not, I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity for the community to weigh in on that, or how often we look at traffic light patterns and timing, or even if that's our role.
That might be a question that Mr. Putnam can answer better than I, but I know, for instance, Merriman Avenue is a DOT-controlled road, and so changes to traffic signals affecting their roadways would, I'm sure, have to be approved by them. And I don't recall if the traffic study for this project got that far. It looked at the intersections around the project area. I don't know. I can't recall if it included that one or not. Ken may have more to share.
Ken?
Sorry, took me a little while. This is Ken Putnam again, Transportation Department. Sage, that's a very good question. And what we try to do, unfortunately, we're not in a proactive position to where we can, on a regular basis, review various intersections to see if the timings can be improved. But we try to react to concerns that we get from the public and try to look at individual ones from that standpoint. Shannon is right. You know, the DOT would have to be involved in changing that. And obviously, any time that you make a change like it was described at Chestnut and Merriman, what that would do is have, right now, the side street, Chestnut, goes at the same time. So they have to wait to turn for the straight. And then if they were to change it, then that means each side would get their turn to go. And then what that does is it takes green time away from the main line. So it's something that would have a compounding effect to other intersections that would have to be analyzed. But we can certainly, ask the DOT for something like that in general, and we work together because we meet with them on a monthly basis to discuss pedestrian and bicycle issues, including what we can do to improve signals. I hope that helps.
I looked up the traffic study, and it does look at the intersection of US 25 and Chestnut Street. It just says the traffic operations at the intersection are anticipated to be acceptable for both AM and PM peak hours for the build-out conditions. So I don't think they were anticipating worsening of the condition.
And I imagine as more projects approach this area, that will increase. I wonder, Ken, I think that's wonderful if there's a chance to talk to them monthly. This community has been fairly organized in petitioning. I wonder if they can also, is there an opportunity for them to reach out to DOT in some way?
Yes, they can, and that best contact would be the division traffic engineer, who is Anna Henderson. And if anyone that's listening needs that contact information, if they would just send me an email, I would be happy to send it. I'm thinking especially, I think Will was on, and some of the other community groups. I'll be glad to furnish it to them, and they can get it out to their folks.
Thank you, Ken.
And Ken, didn't you also say, Ken, that you were looking at the parking situation on Chestnut Street? Because sometimes you get to just one car being able to go through. And isn't the city taking a look and trying to figure out maybe you only allow parking on one side of the street? Wasn't that something that you've told me about before?
Yes, that's correct, Wynn. And what we've been doing, and that was when the previous traffic engineer was here, he had started that process. What we were even thinking about doing was physically marking the parking spaces and alternating them up and down the street so that we could still have a clear pathway. But we just have not implemented it yet. It's probably about 80% complete. And once we get the new traffic engineer up to speed, we'll probably pick that project back up.
I think Kim has a question next.
Thank you. So I'm looking at Plans and Evaluations Exhibit D, pages 12 through 14. And one of the things that was brought up by the callers was the transition from Charlotte Street back into the neighborhood, that it would be 5 stories where it met the neighborhood. But that's not what I'm seeing. So is it possible for staff to confirm what the transition height will be by the time it gets to that 30-foot buffer?
It would be 3 stories.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions? Okay, we have a two-part voting process for this evening. And so the first vote we need is a motion and a second regarding the land use incentive grant to Cassinger Development Group for 130 Charlotte Street. Do I have a motion to approve a land use incentive grant to Cassinger Development Group for 130 Charlotte Street?
Mayor, this is Sage. I move.
Okay, do I have a second?
This is Gwen, I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second, and I'll do a roll call vote. Okay, first, Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Aye, okay, I heard you. Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Okay. Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Myself, aye. And Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, do I have a motion and a second to approve the conditional rezoning of 130 Charlotte Street from Community Business 1 District to Commercial Expansion Conditional Zone?
So moved.
Was that Sandra? Yeah.
I think so. And Sage, I'll second.
And Mayor, excuse me, but that,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did we just mess that up?
Well, no, if we make that motion, do remember that there is an edit to be made in the conditions, which is listed as Exhibit E, which we need to make sure that we are amending the motion to reflect a 30-year affordability period.
Or that the motion includes an Exhibit B
Exactly.
with a 30-year affordability period rather than a 20-year. Sandra, do you make that motion?
Yes, so moved. Yes.
Okay, and second, I believe, was Sage. Okay,
Yes,
thank
I
you.
second.
Okay, all right, again, I will do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
No.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I can't see Maggie, but I assume she got all that. Okay, that concludes our public hearings agenda. We are now moving on with our agenda. We do not have any items of unfinished business. We have one item of new business tonight, and that regards boards and commissions. So I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Mayor to handle this portion of the agenda.
All right, Boards and Commissions Committee met this morning and we made the following recommendations for appointments. For the Board of Adjustments, there's an alternate seat open, but no applications were received, so the clerk's office will re-advertise. For the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee, the committee recommends the appointment of David Bartholomew. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Let me change my screen so I can see everybody. Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Mayor Manheimer.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion carries. For the Human Relations Commission, Kim, you have a comment?
I do. For the Human Relations Commission, I'm the liaison to that group, and I know that we have a recommendation out of boards and commissions. We also have a Human Relations Commission meeting scheduled for next week. And one of the things I am hearing from some members of the HRCA is that they be allowed to make a recommendation as a group. We have accepted recommendations from the group instead of just the chair. And I think that that would be a benefit for this group, especially because they are going into their retreat and being able to make that decision together.
That's good.
Which
And
means that it would be delaying our appointment until October 28th.
The current appointment.
Correct.
Okay. So because the chair made a recommendation to hold all appointments, but what you're saying is that was only representative of the chair and not the full board.
Correct.
So to delay this until.
So we have a Human Relations Commission meeting next Thursday. My ask is that it be officially on the agenda so that the group could make a recommendation as the whole instead of just one person. And then that recommendation could come to council on October 28th.
My only concern with that is that this commission is preparing for a retreat next month. And I would love for them to be fully staffed, so to speak, going into that retreat rather than delay. So with the motion already being set, is there a second? Was there a second? I don't remember.
I'll second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Mayor.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
All right, the motion carries.
Vice Mayor,
Ma'am?
can I just double check that it was Councilwoman Kilgore that seconded that motion?
I believe, no, okay. Councilwoman Mosley.
Got
second.
it.
Yeah, thank you. All right, for the new noise advisory board, we have a sort of breakdown here, so just follow me. The committee recommends Jessica Thomason as a representative for the performing arts seat. Can I get a second?
This is Kim, second.
All right, motion and second. I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Mayor.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
And myself, the motion carries. For the professional in acoustic engineering or related field, the committee recommends Carmelo Pampliano. Can I get a second?
This is Kim, second.
All right, motion and a second. Roll call for approval. Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Mayor.
Aye.
All right, the motion carries. Moving on to the 3 resident seats. The committee recommends Jeff Santiago to represent West Asheville, Rick Freeman, East Asheville, Charles Beck, Central Asheville. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, we had a tie there. We'll go with Councilwoman Kilgore. And I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Mayor.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
This is a great crew we're building. Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Thanks, Sage. Aye.
Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
And I think I did myself, but I'll just say aye again for approval. Okay. Okay, that's that. But we're moving on to, we made a decision about the Planning and Zoning Commission. The committee recommends interviewing all new applicants and the interviewees who could not make the last their last interviews. The appointments will be held on October 26th. And if I'm not mistaken, we're going to have a portion before our meeting to do the interviews, and then we'll state the final appointments during our meeting. Is that correct?
Go ahead.
Kim?
Vice Mayor, this is Kim. I just wanted to note that we haven't yet made votes on the restaurant industry or construction industry seats for the noise ordinance board.
Thank you. Let me go back.
And Vice Mayor Smith, you are correct that after the interviews on the October 26th, council will make the appointment later that evening at their formal meeting.
All right. Thank you, Kim. I did. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Kim. I did skip one seat under the Noise Advisory Board. And let me see.
So from my notes, we had a recommendation for James Corbin Harwood for the restaurant industry and for Anoop Krishnan for the industrial or construction industry out of our meeting this afternoon or morning.
Okay, so, what they have in my notes is a little typo. So for the restaurant industry, we have James Corbin Harwood. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Okay, Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
All right, I'm having a little delay, but just bear with me. Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Mayor.
Aye.
And myself, aye. The motion carries. And I don't have it here in my notes, and I misplaced. There was a final seat you mentioned, Kim. Could you remind me?
Sure, it's a one representative for industrial or construction industry, and our recommendation at boards and commissions was for Anoop Krishnan.
All right, is there, I guess, so moved. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote for that approval. Councilwoman Whistler.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Mayor.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
And I think that concludes it all. If we left out anything, somebody just give me a heads up and we'll run it back. But I'll kick it back over to you, Mayor.
Mayor, I just want to express thank you to the Boards and Commissions Committee. Y'all do an enormous lift for all of us. I know there's a lot that goes into your meetings, and I just really appreciate it. I believe that is Vice Mayor Smith, Councilwoman Mosley, and Councilwoman Roney. So thank you to the three of you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this brings us to the informal discussion and public comment portion of the agenda.
I think Maggie has a question.
You got your hand up.
Direction for us.
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, I just wanted to confirm that for the Planning and Zoning Commission, your interviews will be for the 6 new applications that came in and for the one person who was unable to attend the last interview for P&Z last time.
Yes,
just wanted to confirm that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, now on to informal discussion and public comment. Staff will now connect live calls from our speaker queue for informal discussion and public comment. Again, we are only taking callers who signed up in advance. Callers, you will first hear staff inform council that you are next to speak. Then you will hear an automated message letting you know you're unmuted and live in the meeting. You may begin speaking after the automated message. If you accidentally drop out of the speaker queue, just redial the number and meeting code. Press *3 to rejoin the speaker queue. You'll have 3 minutes to comment, and at the end of the 3 minutes, you'll hear a bell and staff will ask you to wrap up your comment. I'm going to turn it over to staff to manage the informal discussion and public comment, and just for your knowledge, we have 7 people signed up to speak.
Our first caller is Ken Nelson. Ken, your line is open.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council members. My name is Ken Nelson. I'm the current president of Asheville Sister Cities, and I'm here today to thank you for your recognition of our organization with the proclamation that we're receiving, and to just say a few words about what the Asheville Sister Cities have been up to during this pandemic. It's obviously been a very difficult time for everyone, and especially a group that's focused on interpersonal communications and delegations and visits. But we have worked our hardest to remain relevant with our 7 sister cities that are located in 6 countries on 4 different continents. We have just completed a very ambitious wheelchair project where we delivered wheelchairs to 3 different cities down in Mexico, including Valladolid and San Cristobal de las Casas, 2 of our sister cities. And we are actually in the planning stages for an event later this month that will be celebrating aquaculture with both our sister city, Karkonopi, Greece, as well as with a shout out to Osogbo, Nigeria, both cities which also have fish farming operations that we're sharing information with. And that's at the heart of sister cities, that it's not just a cultural exchange, it's a commercial exchange, it's a humanitarian exchange, it's an attempt to build bridges with our brethren around the globe in many areas. And to sum up my comments, and I think my vice president and the incoming president, Jessica Cofield, will also be speaking, but we are very pleased to say that we will be putting up a sign recognizing the 7 sister cities on the plaza, and that hopefully will be able to raise the profile of all the work that we're doing on behalf of the city of Asheville. So thank you for your time, and I'll leave it there.
Council, our next caller is Jessica Cofield.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And thanks, Ken, for that introduction. And thank you, everyone on council, for allowing us this time to speak. As October is generally Asheville Sister Cities month, where we try to make sure that our community really understands what it is that we're doing. We always want to take this time to come before City Council because we do exist at your, really on your behalf. So representing our government, our municipality in other countries around the world. So thank you, Ken, for kind of giving an overview of everything that we've done in the last year. And I look forward to serving you all in 2022 and 2023. And really that probably sums it up, but thank you.
Council, our next caller is Jonathan Wainscott.
Oh, it's Jonathan Wainscott. I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge this historic city council, Oh, hey, this is Jonathan. I hope that didn't get interrupted. I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge this historic city council. Historic in a number of ways. Historic for being the first all-female council. Historic because we have 3 Black female counselors. And historic also because you're the youngest, you're the babies. The oldest city council, of course, was formed in 1931, and the very first person to be announced as a candidate for our new council manager form of government in 1931 was a woman. She was listed as Mrs. M. Harris, which I think is interesting because that would be a moniker for our current mayor if she were going by the social conventions of 1931. The Citizen Times describes Mrs. M. Harris as a prominent club woman and a leader in the fight for the new city charter. Mrs. Harris, the only woman to file yesterday, has large real estate holdings in Buncombe County. She operated the old Knickerbocker boarding house on College Street on the site of the present courthouse for many years. She was active in securing the repeal of the absentee ballot and was a leader in the charter campaign. Now, the absentee ballot was first eliminated for municipal elections because of the efforts of the voters in Buncombe County and Asheville, and we set a precedent in doing that. Mrs. Roney had mentioned the importance of setting some precedents here in Asheville with the election system of our school board. I would implore you to look at the history of our precedent setting 1931 political activities, including the repeal of absentee ballots in municipal elections. And in 1915, Asheville became the first city to abolish our ward system of elections. So in 1937, the redlining that everybody is talking about was done by a man named William Coleman. And that very same William Coleman was involved in the 1931 election and formation of our council manager form of government. It was all very much a Jim Crow effort that was designed and created here in Asheville back in 1931. So I'm just hoping that this historic council will do some historic things, and I wish you all the best. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Council, our next caller is Nat Dickinson. Nat, your line is now open.
Thank you. I am speaking to you today on behalf of myself and my neighbors living at the intersection of Montford Avenue and Winetta. The sinkhole in the driveway of the rental property at 271 Montford Avenue is placing our homes at risk. At the time the sinkhole opened, I was told by the stormwater operations manager that because it was on private land, they would notify the homeowners who would be compelled to take action. In the 82 days since the sinkhole opened on July 22nd, it has steadily expanded without any direct action from the owners or the city, and no plan has been registered with the city to resolve the issue. What might distinguish this sinkhole from others around the city is that it is caused by a failing stormwater culvert that exists almost exclusively to carry city stormwater from Montford Avenue. Because of this, it poses two risks to our properties. The first is the continuing expansion of the sinkhole, which has already engulfed the sidewalk and is on the edge of my property, threatening my home. The second is the blockage of the stormwater culvert. This culvert is the only stormwater collection point for almost half mile of Montford Avenue from Chestnut to Watauga, handling a huge amount of water during heavy rains. When the culvert was briefly blocked by the sinkhole debris during the downpour last Thursday, the storm drains backed up to the street and several nearby homes flooded, including my own. We're asking two things. We ask for the urgent intervention of the city in the repair of the stormwater culvert. The corporation that owns the rental property is entirely unresponsive to the neighbors, so we have no information. The city replies to my inquiries to this point have been to quote regulations and decline involvement. We've tried to be patient in hopes that it would work itself out, but it seems that without our intervention, the city is not even monitoring the situation. We also ask that the city conduct a thorough review and develop a new stormwater plan for Montford Avenue. Over a century ago, the developers of our properties may have installed this culvert, but was the road even paved at that time? The city has since installed 4 huge storm drain openings to utilize this culvert, and it's unclear what else may have changed in the intervening century. Should the stormwater be diverted from other points along Montford Avenue is my question. What else could also be done? In closing, I just want to really encourage you to take this seriously. For 2.5 months, this has tortured us, and we'd very much like to see it resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask the city manager to provide some information about that. I'm familiar with it. I walked Montford recently and saw that sinkhole, and I know that it originates on private property, but it does look like it's beginning to undermine not only the neighboring property, but the sidewalk and public right of way. So I know our city manager's on here, and I'll ask for some information about that and what, if any, city involvement will be expected in that situation.
We'll get you an update, Mayor.
Council, our next and final caller is David Greenson.
That the public comment process continues to be an inequitable obstacle course, and in order to be heard on the reparations process, You have to wait hours and hours until the very end of the meeting. And in the end, I'm going to be the only person to speak to this issue tonight. And is that really what we want? Just hearing from one white man rather than the thousands of people who need to be heard from. I know I've raised this point out of public comment so many times before. I can't help it. I know this isn't something that you all are interested in changing, but I just can't help but raise it. I mainly wanted to speak out tonight about the composition of the Reparations Commission and what that says about who matters in this reparations process. City Council is going to pick 6 representatives. That's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. Each city council member will almost get their own representative on this commission. In contrast, the neighborhood of Shiloh, with 5,700 people, only 22% of whom are Black, will get 2. That's a ratio of 2,850 to 1. So essentially what this boils down to, if you do the math, is that this in the formation of this commission, we're going to value the voice of each city council member 2,400 times more than each Shiloh community member. As was pointed out earlier, the only neighborhoods that are going to be guaranteed any representation are the 4 that have neighborhood associations. That's only 40% of the Black population in Asheville. The rest are not guaranteed to have any representation at all. So, basically, if you do the math, if you're a member of city council, your voice in this process amounts to almost a full representative. If you're a member of one of the 4 named neighborhoods, your voice is valued at 0.0005 of a representative. And if you're not a member of those neighborhoods, you could easily end up with nothing. My point in saying all this is that it speaks very loudly about whose voices are considered the most important in this reparations process. The whole process is supposed to be a sacred one that addresses the fact that Black lives and voices haven't mattered in this town for hundreds of years. But what this process is demonstrating is that those lives that matter still don't matter very much. I don't think you can have a legit process of reparations when 60% of Black Asheville will have little to no representation. And you all have a lot of power and discretion in this process, and I want you to reconsider that. There's nothing that prevents you from letting Black Ashevilleans choose all of the commission members. I don't think that you all think that your voices are thousands of times more important in this process than that of Black community members. You can show us all whose voices you consider most important by telling Ms. Jones and Ms. Mills and Ms. Campbell, but you don't want to pick 6 members of the commission yourself. You don't want your voices to drown out that of Black Asheville. You want Ms. Jones to design a truly representative commission selected by a transparent process that lifts up every Black voice in this city, instead of one that prioritizes your voices and continues to marginalize almost all the Black people in this town. I hope you will consider that. Thank you so much.
Council, I believe that was our last caller. Is that right, staff?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, folks, that concludes our agenda. If there's not anything else, we will be adjourned until our next meeting, which is October 26th, right, Maggie? That's right. Okay. And of course, as usual, everyone will wear a costume to that meeting, right? Just kidding.
I'm going to go as a city council member.
Right. Yeah, that's usually what we do. All right. Well, thank you and everyone. Good night.